So something fun that we get to talk about now is the color stuff, and Procreate's color system is one of my favorites. I really, really like it, and it makes it really easy to create palettes that are very pleasing, that work well together, and that also work for you. There are so many different ways for you to look at color and think about color using Procreate's palette tools. So now that leaves us with how to work with color in Procreate. Now you can find your color palette and all of its associated features up here in the very top right, where you can see the current color you have selected. So if you click on that, it'll open up this color palette. And the first view I think that you'll see is probably this disk view. So the way that color essentially works in this program, much like many other painting programs, softwares, there are three sort of factors that go into picking the color that you're going to work with. So you have your hue, which is usually represented in some kind of rainbow spectrum like this. You might see it in a horizontal line from left to right. So that's your base color, if you will. You know, if I want it to be blue, that's where I'm going to find my hue down here. You also have your saturation, which is how bright and vivid the color is. So if I take my slider, bring it up to here, this is a fairly saturated color, but the more that I drag it down this way and it gets gray, that's kind of taking the color out and desaturating the color. So you get more of a muted or like an earthy tone when you do that. And we also have value. So value is the lightness or the darkness, which specifically relates to the amount of white or black in a color. So you can have a color that is down here, which is a pretty desaturated, dark value blue. And then maybe I can take yellow and crank it up to here where it's quite pale, and have that to be a saturated, light white yellow. So the disk view is just one of many ways that you can use to pick your color in Procreate. But there's also the classic view, which might be more familiar if you work in Photoshop. It has this big square palette. And as I mentioned before, sometimes you'll see this hue slider on this horizontal line like this. And you can drag left or right to find, maybe an orange. So your values, on the left side of this palette, you have white at the very top. And as you move down, we get darker all the way into true black. And then saturation works on left to right. So anywhere on the right, you're going to have the most saturation, the most vibrant amount of pigment in your color. And then bring it over to the left to desaturate it and get into more gray tones. You can also toggle these with the sliders here. So right, as you can see, this is very saturated. And we also have a value slider where right is white and down here to the left is pure black. You can see that it's reflected on this square palette as well. So as I move these sliders, this moves around. And again, you can change your hue here. So I'm going to skip over Harmony really quickly because that is my favorite color tool in Procreate, and I'm excited to talk with you about it. But if we go to Value, this boils it down to these sliders even further. So Value is where you can actually dial in numerically the colors you want if you have that information. So Hue, you can see, works on a 360-degree spectrum, and we have percentages for the amount of saturation and the amount of value. So something that I work with a lot for neutral background colors so that I can get a better idea of how a specific palette is working in a neutral setting. I'll set 50% gray, which I know is right down the middle. Oop. And then drop that into the background, and I can work with any color on top. And it just helps my eye kind of see how this color is working in the most neutral environment possible. So we also have our RGB sliders on this panel. So the RGB sliders might be a little unintuitive if you haven't used them before, but every color in a digital painting program works in this way where we're combining red, green, and blue values to produce the final colors, color mixing. So you can see that I set it to be a 50% gray, totally desaturated, so there's no pigment really coming through there. And it's straight down the middle are RGB sliders, or 127, 127, 127. If you have your RGB values all the same across the board, you'll get gray because it's all perfectly even. Nothing is tilted one way or the other. So how these sliders work is if I take the red slider, the R at the top, if I take it and slide it to the left, I'm removing red value. So if I want, for example, a bright blue and a pure blue, if I take the red and the green all the way down, I get blue because blue is the only color that's remaining. And I can crank that up to be brighter. I don't typically work with the RGB sliders, but it can be fun to play around with. This is also the panel where if you have a hex code for the color that you're using, for example, you might be illustrating in a company's brand colors and you need to make sure that you have that dialed in exactly. You can drop the hex code in here and just type whatever, and that is where that will go. So to take a quick look at palettes, Procreate has a really helpful palette system so you can save colors and not have to worry about putting in your hex code every time, or mixing the same colors, or going through and color dropping wherever you had your colors before in your piece. So you can see I have a few here, and it's as simple as going up here to the plus sign, creating a new palette, and you can rename that whatever you like. And to add a color, you just simply have any color selected, which is happening by default, and click a square. And you can keep doing that. So you see that I have this palette that I just created. Now it's here in the bottom. Because it's my most recent palette, it's going to show up as my default palette, which you can change in the palette window too. If I want this one here to be my default palette, I can set as default. And now I'll have access to it anywhere in my color picker window of choice. So go back to palettes. I'll set this new one as a default. And let's go to the disk view. And so if I want to keep making colors and keep adding colors that work in this palette, I can make them, and I can put them anywhere in here, which is kind of interesting. So you can also click and drag the palettes anywhere, so that if I have some colors that I kind of want to be separate, maybe they're for special use case, they can be over here on their own. I can also, I don't need the same color twice. So if you hold down, you can delete a swatch. If you could just hold and press, you'll get a little pop-up window and hit delete. And there you go. So the thing I wanted to talk to you about is this Harmony palette. This is one of my favorite tools in Procreate because I love the way that it helps you figure out what looks good together. And it's just a really quick way to play with color. So if you look at this illustration that I did, I originally did it in black and white. It's not normally how I work, but that can be a fun exercise because working without any color is a really good way to focus on composition and shapes and texture, and to just not worry about how color is going to affect it. And then I thought I would go through and have some fun using the Harmony palette tools to do some different color schemes for this illustration. So if you look through, I have this one that you've seen before, these pinks and greens. It's kind of dark greenish yellow color. And then one with purple and green, which I thought was kind of cute. And then this one, which is a little bit more, I don't know, autumnal, a little orange and green with some blue on it. And this is just fun to play around with. So let us see what we can do with our Harmony palette. So I have opened up the original file where I saved all of the individual layers for this illustration. And that way we can just drag and drop from the palette. If I want to color each individual element, they're all broken out into their own layers. So I can just quickly recolor this image. So let's say, what color did we not do? We didn't have like a primary yellow illustration. So maybe we build this color palette around a bright yellow. So in my Harmony window, I'm going to click up here nice, vivid, saturated yellow. And you can see that I have another little circle here that immediately moved when I did that. So I'm gonna grab my main circle, drag it, and it's just following right along. So let's take this yellow. Feel good about that. So I'll take this yellow and drag it in there. Ooh, I like that. But now I need something complementary, if you will, to color in his little stripes and his little underside of the top of this mushroom here. So if I want something that is different but looks nice with that same color, well, Procreate's already picked it out for me because that is what this little circle is. Now, if I can click on that, I get that color here. Let me make sure I'm on the right layer. Cute, okay. We'll put them in the underside. Nice. So, all right. I actually, maybe that's too much. Maybe the stripes should be something similar to the yellow. Maybe this is a little too much going on with this mushroom guy. So I can open up my palette. I will click and hold to get the original color back, or you can go and it's still right here where it was in the palette on the opposite side of this bluish kind of purpley color that we have selected now. And now, okay, I want something that will work with this yellow, but that's not quite as contrasting as this blue. So I will click up here in the top left. And if you click up here in the top left where it says colors complementary, you're going to get a little pop-out window with some more options. We have split complementary, analogous, triadic, and tetradic. So what happens if we try a different option, split complementary? Okay, so it's kind of the same energy as the complementary, but now we have two, and they're slightly offset, so it's not as contrasting as these opposite colors. So we have a little bit of a lighter blue and a purple. And also, we could try analogous colors. I like this one a lot because it gives you colors that are right to the, sort of to the left or the right of the hue that you're working with now, which can be really nice if you want to have something similar, but a little bit different. So we could try maybe this like nice orange would be good for his little, something like that. Kind of like a little macaroni. So I kind of like this so far. We have this like purpley color and then a yellow and orange. So what would we want to do for the background? So if you'll look quickly at the other illustrations, the other color palettes of this illustration that I did before, you might notice a few things. So this one that you can see, the mushroom is the only blue element in the whole image, contrasting with the background. It's more of a warm tone, oranges, yellows, and warm greens. Same kind of goes for this one. The colors that you're seeing in the mushroom are sort of contrasting, a little bit more of a middle ground where we use this purple throughout, but the body of the mushroom is this yellow. And then this one here, where it's another step down in that process where the whole body and the top of the mushroom is pink. It does have some green elements, but also the green on the mushroom you don't see anywhere else in the background. So all this to say that when you're working with an illustration like this and you want, this character to be the focal point, there should be some kind of contrasting element that makes him pop on the background. And so even if I take away all the color and we just look at the original black and white, this mushroom is very light. It has the lightest tones, and everything else in the background is at a certain level of darkness, of value, or lower, so that the mushroom will immediately pop even without any color. And then you kind of want to take that principle and piggyback off of that as you're developing the color palette. So let's go back to our yellow one that we're working on here. So with that in mind, we've chosen this really bright, vibrant yellow. So maybe for him to stand out, we want him to sit in a background that is darker, like it is now, for the color itself to not be so vibrant. Now let's see what we have. So we're still in our analogous palette, and I'm kind of wondering, maybe green would be a good jumping off point for the background here, because it's analogous to our original yellow color. And so if we click on this green, and we have that selected, now I'm going to change back to our complementary palette. And you can see that the complement of this green, so the opposite of it on this color wheel, is purple. And that's close, not exactly the same, but close to this blue color here, bluish purple color here. So maybe that could work. Now it does feel a little too bright and vibrant right now. So let's say that we're going to make the tree trunk behind the mushroom this green. Ooh, so it's quite a lot all at once. But maybe if we take it and we use this slider to bring it down a bit and make it darker. It's kind of mossy looking. So I don't really love how this is working. And some of that is personal preference, but I also wonder, is it because this green is a little bit too much of a departure for this image? Let's try using this purpley color as our base instead. So I'll hold down to get that into our palette. So I will darken it a bit and maybe drag it here into the middle to lighten it up. Now you'll notice that the Harmony palette does not seem to have a slider for desaturating. And for this, it's sort of a combo of editing the values and lightening here in the actual palette window. So just something to keep in mind. You can also jump into any other palette view at any time if you want to use a different configuration to adjust a color. But I'll stick here for now, and I think that might be a little too light, so let's darken it up a little bit more. But we've basically taken that purple and made it a lot more gray and a lot more muted. And we'll try that. Now that I like. That is really contrasting in a pleasant way with how significant the yellow is here. And then his little mushroom underside is still pretty popping in comparison to this color in the back. So let's take this basic scheme and we'll just go through and color the rest of the image. And there you go. You have a fully colored illustration where all the colors are kind of working well together, but they're pretty different. And I wouldn't have been able necessarily to easily construct this palette without the help of this color tool, making it really easy for me to play around and find what colors work together, or what do I like? What am I feeling? You know, at the beginning when I was coloring this in, I didn't really like how the green was looking, but it's easy to quickly test these different colors and just have like little leads to follow as I'm trying to figure out what I think looks good, what feels right to me, and maybe, you know, what works for this piece. So just a quick addition for ones that we didn't look at. You also have your triadic, which is these three dots here. It's much more than the split complement, which as you can see is one primary color with a complementary color that's been offset slightly in each direction. So triadic is more of an actual like 3 different points on the color wheel in this perfect triangle. But they can also go together in a very pleasing way. And in a little bit more advanced mode, we have tetradic, which is the same thing, but 4, add 4. And all of these different ones are really fun to play around with as you're getting into color exploration.